Hey guys, Will here. So about a month and a half ago now, I mentioned in my video where I said we were going full time with Boosted Media that I wanted to start sharing a little bit more about my personal journey with you guys. And this video is going to be sort of the first step in doing that. I've started to share a little bit more in the last couple of videos that I've been doing over the last couple of weeks, but I really want to try and take that a step further today in today's video and talk to you a little bit more about my background and my struggles with depression and anxiety more specifically. This is something that I've touched on very, very rarely in videos before, but whenever I have mentioned it, there's always been a overwhelmingly positive response. Now, this isn't about trying to fish for likes or trying to fish for sympathy or anything like that. The motivation behind this video is, I guess, sharing my story with you guys who might also be suffering with similar kinds of struggles to what I've been through in my life, and really try to reach out and help you guys out with those situations. So if that's something that you're interested in hearing about, stick around. You're more than welcome to minimize this video as well. It's just going to be a face talking to the camera today. It's not going to be any other action, so you can minimize and just listen in the background. If this is something that you're not in the slightest bit interested in learning more about at all, that is perfectly fine as well. Feel free to click off. This video is not for you. But basically, I want to start off by sharing a little bit more about my background, how I've gotten to be, I guess where I am today, making videos for you guys, and then also talk a little bit about my experience with depression and anxiety as a part of that, and then also share some of the strategies that I've developed over the last 35 years of doing life in the hope that that will help some of you guys out as well. So if that's something you're interested in, stick around. So basically, my story with depression and anxiety started when I was very, very young. From a very, very early age, it was obvious that I was a little bit different from some of the other kids. I was never actually formally diagnosed with Asperger's or autism or anything like that, but my parents always kind of suspected that I was on the spectrum, and it wasn't until only a couple of years ago that I was actually diagnosed with very mild Asperger's syndrome. Now, that's not something that I've ever mentioned on the channel before. A lot of you guys who might be on the spectrum have probably already figured it out from little aspects of my personality. I'm always fidgeting with my hands. I'm always, a little bit agitated and things like that, and that's all pretty typical stuff from a person that's on the spectrum, but that explains that for you guys. But yeah, so it's always been a little bit obvious that, well, actually quite obvious that I'm quite different from a lot of the other kids. And I guess the way that that manifested itself at the earliest stages in my childhood was, as a kid, I was always a little bit socially reclusive and things like that. I suffered very, very, very severely from separation anxiety. So whenever my mum wasn't around or whenever she dropped me off at preschool or even school, this extended right into almost high school, I was always freaking out and, just really overreacting to anything that, a normal person would just sort of take in their stride from day to day. And I think that's probably one of the big factors that's been a struggle for me is, how it affects my day-to-day life and just things that everyday people take for granted that are a real problem for me. But we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in just a moment. But yeah, early life manifested itself as, struggling socially, being a little bit socially reclusive, not wanting to be away from my mum and dad, being scared of anything that was outside of my, I guess, comfort zone. So anytime that I was in a situation that was potentially dangerous or something like that, that was out of my control. And I think that's really the distinguishing factor there. I mean, I used to do things like, I raced motorbikes as a kid and stuff like that. And I was never scared. I was always cautious. I was never scared to ride a motorbike. I was never scared to, send it over a big jump or something like that. I would always send my little brother over first just to test that it was safe. But, I was never really, I guess, disadvantaged as a kid because I wasn't, willing to try things and have fun. But, it was always a little bit more of a struggle for me than it might have been for some of the other kids. And that was obvious in the way that I guess, interacted with other kids as well in school. So that was sort of the early signs. And then when I was 12 years old, my parents split up. And I'm not going to go into all the details about that now because it's not really overly relevant to this video. But, I found myself in a situation at 12 years old where I had to grow up very, very quickly. And that wasn't my parents' fault by any means. It wasn't like there was an expectation on me or anything like that. But, I was in a situation where, my mum was going through a really difficult time. I had a younger brother. He was only 8.5 years old at the time. And I felt a sense of responsibility to my family to sort of man up and, take control of the situation to an extent. And because I wasn't, I guess, emotionally mature enough to deal with the situation that I found myself in, that created a lot of problems as well. And I guess I took on a lot of the responsibility that I probably shouldn't have at that age. And again, not through any fault of my parents. There was never any expectation there, but just naturally I wanted to step up. There was always a lot of concern there about my mum's welfare in particular, my younger brother's welfare, and, wanting to be around to make sure that they were okay. So that's, I guess, brought out a lot more anxiety and uncertainty in my life as well, because suddenly the comfort zone that I'd always sort of lived in my entire life was stripped away from me. All the things that I'd sort of become accustomed to and comfortable with were just kind of gone in an instant, and that was a real struggle. So that triggered a lot of anxiety and depression around that as well. And again, I'm going to talk about the link between anxiety and depression in just a moment for you guys as well. But that was sort of the start of my real problems at about 12 years old. From there, that was around the same time that I was transitioning from primary school through to high school. So in Australia, we start high school in year 7, which is around sort of 12 to 13 years of age. And I was transitioning from a small school into a larger school, going from about 65 students to over 1,000 students. And because of my Asperger's and the fact that I didn't cope well socially to begin with, on top of all the other problems of social relation and all the things that were going on at home as well, that was a massive struggle, and it was just way too much for me, and I just didn't cope. And I basically started to refuse to go to school at all. I ended up doing homeschooling for an entire year, for year 7, simply because I couldn't cope socially. And that set me back quite dramatically in terms of my, I guess, emotional and relational maturity as well. When I started going back to school in year 8, I was very emotionally immature compared to a lot of the other kids. So I found myself in a situation where I related to other children even less. And, obviously at early teenage years, that's a real problem when you're sort of starting to develop relationships that are deeper than just, hey, what do you want to do after school? What computer game do you want to play? Where do you want to ride our bikes? Starting to get interested in girls and stuff like that as well. So it made me quite different from the other kids. And when you put that on top of, the social struggles that I had related to my anxiety and my Asperger's, on top of that, it really was a bit of a recipe for disaster. So what I sort of started to do at that point was, I guess, go into a bit of a reclusive state. So I started to, just sort of keep myself to myself and started to, I guess, do things for myself that I enjoyed that didn't necessarily rely on other people. And, a part of that was starting to look at doing things like software development. And, I remember at the time I was starting to get into programming. And so I always kind of gravitated towards things that were, I guess, productive. I didn't really burn a whole lot of time on things like playing computer games or, board games or things like that. I always did things that were, I guess, teaching me skills. But I was very, very socially reclusive as a result of that. And the reason why I'm telling you all of this is because it's relevant to, I guess, explaining some of the strategies that I've developed through that experience that I'm hoping will help some of you guys out. So I think at this point, it's also important to acknowledge that every single person's journey is different. And I'm sure that a lot of you guys that might be watching this video can relate a lot to what I'm saying so far in my personal story. But a lot of you as well are probably thinking, what's this guy on about? My story is way different from this guy. And I'm sure that a lot of you as well are thinking, well, this guy's talking about all these situations like he's sort of been through a hard life. My story is way worse than this guy. And I think that's something that we tend to struggle with a lot as human beings in general. We like to, I guess, compare our story to other people, and not necessarily in a in a negative way or in a judgmental way. Even a lot of the time, we compare ourselves to other people's stories, I guess, to judge whether we should be feeling the way we do about certain situations. And I know a lot of the time, if I'm struggling with something, I'll try to talk to mates about, what I'm going through, and they'll start to tell me a little bit about their story. And suddenly I realize, wow, I really don't have a whole lot to complain about here. And I almost feel guilty about, complaining about the situation that I've been finding myself in and the feelings that I've been having, simply because, a lot of my mates might be in a far worse situation. And I've been pretty lucky that although I've been through some heavy stuff with, my parents splitting up when I was a young kid, and, I've been through relationship breakdowns and stuff like that. I was actually engaged when I was about 18 years old, and that all fell in a heap for, various horrible reasons. And, so I've been through a lot. But I've always been lucky with health and stuff like that. I've never had any major health problems. I've never had a death in my immediate family or anything like that. So I haven't had to deal with a lot of the things that a lot of you guys might have had to deal with. But that doesn't mean that my situation isn't worthy of sympathy and of, talking to other people about. And I think that's something that we often trip up with. Every person's situation is their own. And, everybody's gauge of suffering and everybody's gauge of, going through hardships and struggling and dealing with these situations is based upon their own life experience. So it's really not fair to us, in ourselves, to compare ourselves to other people in that regard. Really what you should be doing is, I guess, trying to benefit as much as you can from everybody else's experience around you, because people are generally pretty helpful and people generally want to help you if you share your experience with them. But we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. Where I'm going with all of this is basically, wanting to explain a little bit around my background and the reasons why I'm doing the things that I'm doing today. So I kind of, in that period of my life where I was trying to find my feet, going through high school, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, it was always pretty clear to me that I wasn't really a particularly career-driven person. And that's, it's funny to say that, because I was always, I guess, motivated by learning and not necessarily gaining an education, but I've always been the sort of person that wants to understand how things work and is relentless in my pursuit of gaining knowledge, not necessarily academically, but just, doing research. And, I grew up in a time where the internet was invented, basically as I was growing up through my teenage years. So I've sort of seen the evolution of that and been a part of that. And I'm just going to have a little sip of water here. But, so I've always been fascinated by learning and furthering my education. And what I realized is that I had a natural skill and a natural gift for, I guess, sharing that knowledge that I'd acquired through my own research with other people, and I guess distilling it in a way that makes sense to other people so that they can understand it, that might not necessarily, have the type of brain that is conducive to learning a lot of stuff, through the means of, reading text and, doing research and stuff like that. So I've always, I've known from a pretty early age that I had a gift for that kind of thing. So my motivation in life became pretty quickly to sort of, I guess, find ways that I could use that skill to benefit people in general. And, in school, I was always the guy that would help out people with, computer problems and stuff like that. So I've never necessarily been particularly career driven, but I've always been more motivated by wanting to help people. And I've always kind of felt like if I can share the struggles that I've been through, if I can share the experiences and the knowledge that I've gained through those experiences with other people and help people through that experience, then it's kind of almost, it almost kind of makes it worth it in a sense. So that's something that I've always been massively passionate about. And that's probably one of the main reasons why I started this channel. As I've shared before in previous videos, I started this channel partly as a personal challenge. I wanted to break myself out of a lot of my comfort zones and, I guess challenge myself to do something that I knew was going to be a struggle, develop my skills for, the jobs that I had at the time. As I mentioned before, I was working for Sony at the time, Sony Electronics, as a content developer. And a big part of my job was producing video and stuff like that. So I needed to be comfortable on camera. So I needed to develop that skill. But, I've always just kind of wanted to help people, I guess. And, I've known that I've had a bit of a gift for sharing knowledge. So that's been a bit of a motivation for starting this channel as well. So throughout the process of trying to, I guess, understand myself at a deeper level and, developing my skills, I've come to understand what a lot of my personal triggers are in a lot more detail. And, for me, basically what it boils down to with my anxiety and the related depression to that anxiety is things like lack of control, wanting to be in control of a situation. So for example, I'll happily, race a motorcycle around a circuit as long as I'm driving that motorcycle, but I would never ever get on the back of a bike with somebody else driving. Flying is another massive one, and I'll talk about that example in a little bit more detail in just a moment. But, I really struggle to get on a plane because I'm terrified that something will happen that is, completely beyond my control. Basically, I'm putting myself in a situation where my trust for my life is completely at the mercy of a machine plus the person that's operating that machine. So, it's something that I can't control. And that's always been a huge trigger for me, as well as fear of the unknown as well. So being in situations where, I can't control what's going to happen, or I don't necessarily understand, anything that sort of puts me outside of my comfort zone and outside of my normal routine. And I think part of that is the Asperger's as well, because people that are on the spectrum need to have very, very structured lives. And as soon as I'm outside of that structure, I do really tend to struggle. But part of that learning process is understanding those triggers and understanding how to sort of operate within those, confines and those boundaries to, try to live the highest quality of life as I possibly can. Now, one of the things about anxiety, and I'm sure a lot of you guys will relate to this, is that it makes things that are easy for regular people a real struggle. Now, I want to talk about one example in particular here, a overseas holiday that I went on with Jill, my wife, back in 2013. Now, as I mentioned before, flying and, going overseas, things like that have always been massive fears of mine. Basically because it combines pretty much every single one of my anxiety triggers into one hopelessly overwhelming scenario. So Jill has always been a traveler. She's always been somebody that enjoys going overseas, experiencing new things and stuff like that. So when she expressed a desire to want to travel overseas, I immediately kind of didn't show a whole lot of interest in that. And we actually had quite a few arguments over it in the early stages before she really understood the level of my anxiety around this sort of thing. Obviously, she was excited about planning this trip, and I didn't want to sort of take that away from her. So I said that I would go, but I also sort of said to her, don't expect this to be something that's easy for me. And, a lot of the time we were trying to plan this trip, and I just wasn't showing any enthusiasm whatsoever towards it. And, she actually got quite upset with me quite a few times simply because she thought that I wasn't enthusiastic, that I didn't care, and that I was just generally being stale and boring towards it. What she didn't understand was that that was, a coping mechanism for me. And I'm sure that a lot of you guys that have been in similar situations would understand this. Things that should be fun or enjoyable for regular people, the level of anxiety that anxiety sufferers feel over those sorts of things can be so strong that it actually takes away from the enjoyment of the experience. And that's exactly what happened to me. Not only did I not enjoy or experience any excitement over planning this holiday, but I actually didn't enjoy the holiday at the time either. I was so stressed out and so anxious the entire time just because I was so far outside of my comfort zone that, the whole thing was just a complete, it's almost like it never even happened in my mind. Like it was just a complete blur and I remember this clear as day when we landed on the plane and we spooled down and I knew I was safe when we landed back in Sydney. The sense of relief, like it was like a weight coming off my shoulders, the sense of relief that I felt when I knew that I was back and I was safe and I was back to normal. And it wasn't until that moment that I actually enjoyed all the memories from the trip that I'd had. And, I'm able to look back on that trip now and, have really fond memories. And I'm really glad that I did it. But at the time, I absolutely hated it and I didn't enjoy it at all. And it was quite a stressful experience for Jill and myself. And I'm sure that she would tell you that it was basically like looking after an 8-year-old kid the entire time that we were away. And I'm going to talk about that side of a relationship in just a moment as well. But the big point I'm trying to make here is that, for anxiety sufferers, things that are easy for regular people are a real struggle for us. So it's really important to not only acknowledge that that's the case, but to try and surround yourself with people that understand that. And a big part of doing that is being open and, explaining it to people, because it's not something to be ashamed of. It's your reality. And at least I've found through my own experience that whenever I've opened up and I've talked about, my struggles and I've been honest with people about the fact that I'm not okay with something, people might not understand. They might not be able to relate to your situation, but that doesn't mean that they're not sympathetic. And, whenever I've opened up and I've said, look, guys, I'm really struggling with this. I can't do this. People are like, you know what? It's cool, man. Just go and do what you need to do. If you want to talk about it, that's cool. And, a lot of the time people don't understand, and that's fine. It's not fair to expect people to be able to understand exactly what you're going through all of the time, but that doesn't mean that people can't show sympathy, and that, you know, it doesn't still help to share your feelings and what you're experiencing with other people. And if you don't talk about what's going on, you know, how can you expect people to understand? It's kind of like what I always say about being a manager at work or something like that. You know, if you don't tell your manager that there's a problem, how can they be expected to fix it? You know, if you only tell them, you know, when something blows up and it's beyond the point of being repaired, you can't really blame them for, you know, not being in control of the situation to begin with. So it's kind of like that. But on a relational level, it's really important to try and surround yourself with, you know, I guess, positive thinking people. The worst possible thing that you can do, and this is a big mistake that I've made, you know, in my earlier life, was, you know, we tend to gravitate towards people that, you know, are gonna tell us all the right things or sympathize with us on a negative level. So it's like, oh yeah, you know, that person that did that thing to you is an awful person, and, you know, what an asshole, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, when you get stuck in that negative rut, it just makes you feel worse and worse and worse and worse. And you get to this point where you just feel like it's not worthwhile anymore. And I think that's where the link is between depression and anxiety, because, you know, your anxiety takes away from the enjoyment of day-to-day situations to the point where you just don't enjoy anything anymore. And then you not only do you feel guilty, but you know, you're stifled of all of the enjoyment that you should be experiencing from your day-to-day life. So you're left in this place where you're just depressed, you're not enjoying anything, and you feel like, you know, what's the point of even doing this? Why am I even bothering to get up every morning? And, you know, that's a really dark place to be. So you really do need to surround yourself with people that build you up. And, you know, I mentioned before that, you know, I'd had some pretty bad relationships in the past. And a big part of that was, you know, I always thought that I needed to be with somebody who, you know, was similar to me. And, you know, Jill is the complete opposite of me. She's, you know, you couldn't come up with a more opposite personality to me. She's, you know, really outgoing, really extroverted, really positive all the time, to the point where a lot of the time, you know, she can be completely over the top with her expectations of situations, and, you know, she'll just throw herself into something without even really thinking about it. So I guess I kind of bring her back down to earth in a sense, but she also breaks me out of my comfort zone and pushes me, you know, to try new things and experience new things and enjoy life in general. And that's what a person like me really needs in a relationship. So it's really important to try and surround yourself with people that are positive, and surround yourself with positivity in general. And a big part of that as well is doing things like finding creative outlets. Now, obviously, sim racing has been one of those things for me. Working on cars has been another thing like that for me as well. The last thing that you want to do, at least in my own experience, is, you know, just not do anything that you enjoy. And you might not enjoy the same sorts of things as, you know, a lot of other people enjoy. You might not enjoy social gatherings. You might really struggle with, you know, going to parties and things like that. And I mean, I'm always the guy that sits in the corner on my phone at a party simply because I can't handle all the chatter because of my Asperger's. You know, it's a sensory overload for me. But I really struggle with just being overwhelmed by, you know, trying to have conversations with too many people and, you know, not feeling like, you know, I can relate to them. But that's okay. You know, like there are other things that I can do to find enjoyment. And, you know, my sim racing, creating these videos for you guys as well, working on cars, spending time with my kids and stuff like that. You know, those are all things that I'm able to do that I enjoy, that don't push me outside of my comfort zone. So I think that it's really important to find things that you enjoy, that, you know, you're comfortable with. And, you know, if that's not the same sorts of things as what your mates do, that's okay. You know, you don't have to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. You need to understand what your limits are. And, you know, you need to push yourself outside of those limits occasionally, but in a safe way, you know, in a way that there's a safety net there. You've got people around you that are there to pick up the pieces if something does go wrong, you know, and if you do have a breakdown, that's really important. But, you know, you don't want to fall into the trap of always, you know, just being inside your comfort zone all the time. But you also don't want to be pushing yourself to the point where you just can't cope all of the time either. So I think that's really important. Finding those creative outlets, finding those things that you enjoy, that you can do, that don't push yourself outside those comfort zones. And that's something that I talked about in my reasons why I sold my track car and got into sim racing. Because, you know, sim racing is something that I can do, that I enjoy, that, you know, it's not dangerous, it can still be competitive. So I'm still able to get that competitive, thing out of my system, but I'm doing it in a safe environment, and I'm doing it in a friendly environment where people are there to help each other. And that's been a really positive thing for me as well. So what I'm really hoping you get out of this video is I really want to encourage you guys to, don't be ashamed of whatever situation it is that you're in. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. If you want to chat to me, let me know in the comments. I always read every single comment that goes on every single video. We've got the Discord community as well. There's a bunch of guys there that I know who I've chatted to privately that struggle with things very similar to me. They've reached out to me, when they've seen me talk about these things before in my videos. And you'll be surprised, honestly, you'll be shocked at the number of people there are out there that struggle with these things, that never talk about it until they're actually prompted to, until somebody actually comes out and says, hey, I'm struggling. And then suddenly you've got all these people that come out and they're like, you know what, man, I'm struggling too. I really relate to your story. I really relate to what you're saying. And that's been the amazing thing about doing these videos and creating this community, is that I'm building a genuine connection with people that's helped me so much personally. And, I feel like I'm genuinely able to help other people as well through doing this. And that's what makes all of this worthwhile. And I really do hope that if you're watching this and you're relating to what I'm saying, at least at some level, then you'll feel comfortable to reach out to me. And, it might not be me, it might be somebody else, it might be a friend or something like that. But don't be ashamed to be real about your situation. Don't be ashamed of the things that make you unique and the things that make you you, because you're an awesome person. Honestly, I believe that every single person has the potential to do great things. A lot of people unfortunately never realize that potential, but everybody has that potential in them. You're held back by life circumstances. Not everybody has the privilege that I have in terms of, the financial ability to do things like making these videos. And, I have had to make a lot of sacrifices to make this possible. I work crazy hours. I spent many, many years making videos, working hours and hours and hours a week without earning an income at all, just to try and build this up in the background. So it's not like, I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth or anything like that. But, obviously a lot of you guys might be working crazy long hours just to put meals on the table, and you don't have the time to do something creative like this. And that's okay. Like, it's not a competition. But yeah, honestly guys, you'll find when you do talk about what you're going through, people even though they might not understand, people genuinely and genuinely have a desire to want to understand and want to help you. And you will honestly be shocked. It's something that's been reinforced in my life time and time again. Every single time I've reached out and said that I'm not coping, people have come out of the woodwork to help me out, whether it's, cooking a meal for the family if we're struggling, or, just offering a person to talk to, in times of need and stuff like that. It means the world. So yeah, it really is absolutely vital to not underestimate the importance of having those things that you do that bring you joy and enjoyment, and that are a positive creative outlet for your personality. Whatever that is, it might be sim racing, it might be working on cars, it might be drawing, it might be music. I mean, you can see my guitars above me here. That's something that I don't have as much time for as I would love to have. But, it's really important to have something, and it doesn't necessarily need to be something that costs money either. Just pick up a pen and a piece of paper, do some writing, keep a diary, just do something that allows you to get your feelings out there. And you don't even need to share it with somebody else if you don't feel comfortable doing so. I'd encourage you to do it, but you need to be doing something that is an outlet for your creativity and for your personality. And don't allow yourself to be told by other people that that's not worthwhile, or that it's a waste of time or anything like that. I mean, I know a lot of you guys that, are partnered up, have wives or kids or anything like that. A lot of you, and I see it in the Facebook groups all the time, people saying that their wives are complaining about the amount of time that they spend sim racing, or that it's a waste of time, or they're just playing computer games or anything like that. You need to explain to the people that are close to you and that are important to you that it's more than just, wasting time, burning time, playing games and things like that. It is genuinely something that a lot of us guys need to do to stay sane. It's an outlet for that energy, and it's a way for us to express ourselves. And a lot of the time, I think it is, pressure that we actually put on ourselves to, be the man, be the breadwinner, be the guy that, is strong and nothing gets to us. And, we put ourselves in these positions where we have to internalize all of this stuff that's going on, all of our emotion, until we reach the point where we just snap. And I mean, this is something that happens to me all the time. I internalize all this energy to the point where I just snap. But yeah, guys, I really do hope that in watching this video, hopefully sharing a little bit of my background, and I know that my background isn't necessarily going to be, directly applicable to everybody that's out there. And as I said before, the things that I've been through in my life are going to be, a lot worse than what some people have been through, and nowhere near as bad as what a lot of other people have gone through as well. And I'm not trying to say for a second here that my struggles are worse than anybody else's. Everybody's situation is their own, and everybody will relate to this in their own way as well. But I'm hopeful that at least some of this is relevant to you guys, and at least you can relate to it in some way. And hopefully you've been able to take away a couple of practical ways that you can, I guess, analyze your own situation in a little bit more detail and understand what your triggers are, and how you can potentially hopefully develop some strategies around that to cope a little bit better and not be ashamed to share your own experiences. I hope that in coming out and talking so openly about my own experience, it encourages you guys to feel comfortable doing the same thing as well, because there's nothing special or unique about me. I'm just a guy that has been making videos for a while. I've managed to grow a little bit of an audience around doing that, and I've built it to the point where I now have a bit of a platform that I can hopefully use for some good in the world to make a bit of a difference in people's lives. So share this around with your mates if you found it useful. Let me know what you think in the comments below as well, and jump into our Discord community as well if you want to have a chat. Honestly, I always try to make as much time as I can for you guys. There's a bunch of other guys there as well, as I said before, that are more than willing to have a chat with you. And all in all, it's just about building a positive environment, a safe environment where we can, share our common goals, share our common interests, and just generally have a positive way to, do life together, I guess. And, don't be afraid to talk to your mates about it. Don't be afraid to talk to your partners, your wives, your girlfriends, your parents if you're younger, or even if you're older as well. You might be living at home with your parents, and that's totally cool as well. Just talk to the people that are dear to you about your struggles. Talk about your feelings. Don't be ashamed of who you are and what makes you unique. I think that's the biggest thing here. And that's really, I guess, what I've learned from the last 35 years of, developing strategies around this kind of stuff. Life in general isn't easy for me because of the way I am, and I don't pretend for a second like it is. I don't pretend for a second to be this, happy person that's got this amazing privileged life or anything like that. I have a lot of struggles, and a lot of it is just the expectation that I place on myself in my day-to-day life, and I need to break outside of that and be more comfortable in just talking and being a real person, I guess. And that's something that this channel has really, really massively helped me with. So look, I'm going to leave it at that for this video today. I really do hope that you guys have benefited from it, at least in some way, and that it helps you to feel a little bit more, I guess, comfortable in your own skin. But I do really encourage you to, share this with your partners, share this with the people that are close to you if it's something that's helped you guys out. And let's try and, I guess, break the stigma around talking about feelings a little bit more. It's, it's something that's important. It's something that everybody struggles with, at least to some degree, and it's not something to be ashamed of. So guys, look, thank you very much for watching today's video. I know it's something a little bit different for the channel, but as I said, when I said I was going to be moving to doing this full time, I do really want to try and grow this community into something that is bigger than just how-to videos and sim racing videos and stuff like that. I really do want to try and build a community where we can genuinely make a difference in the world and help people out. And this is just the start of this. We're going to be doing charity streams. We're going to be doing fundraisers and stuff like that a little bit further down the track once I got a little bit more time for it. I am going through a really stressful time at the moment, as I shared on Discord the other day, with work and things like that as well. There's a lot of things that I want to do with the channel that I just don't have the time to do right now. But there is definitely light at the end of the tunnel there, and you can expect some pretty awesome things next year, hopefully, if not before. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.